Hello, BookTube. We're continuing our read-along today of the novels of Thomas Covenant the Unbeliever by Stephen R. Donaldson. We're doing the first six. There's a third trilogy that we're going to ignore, but we did the first trilogy. We started in the summer. It's now very much not summer today, and we're moving on. We're almost done. We're in the second book of the second trilogy, The One Tree, which brings us outside of the confines of the land. This imaginary fantasy world where Thomas Covenant, the main character, constantly finds himself transported in various books. It's a very different land in this second trilogy than it was in the first trilogy. The first trilogy, it was an idyllic garden, despite the fact that it was under constant threat by a nefarious energy being named Lord Fowl. It was still a place of healing and wonder. And in this second trilogy, it very much is not. It's a desecrated place. And it needs help. And Thomas Covenant is a changed character. He's not the just irredeemable, bitter a-hole that he was in the first trilogy. In this second trilogy, there's more to him. Maybe he's leavened a little by time. It's been 10 years for him since the previous events in the first trilogy. Or maybe he's leavened a bit by the presence of another human in the story. Lyndon Avery, a doctor from our world, makes the transition to the land with him in the second trilogy. I think she's a bit, the euphemistic word would be underutilized as a character so far. I'll be curious to know what the rest of you think. But the main source of interest for this book and the one that follows is that it takes us away from the land, oddly enough. The land that we meet in The Wounded Land, the first book in the second Chronicles of Thomas Covenant the Unbeliever, is a bitter, dismal place, ruled by a sun that torments people every day, and ruled by a warped version of the lords at Revelstone that actually use blood magic to make their minimal effects on the world around them, and they rule by terror. Covenant is outraged by this. Lyndon Avery doesn't know to be out. She's outraged by the obvious cruelty of it, but she doesn't remember. She wasn't present for the land before. Thomas Covenant knows what a desecration this is, and he wants to fix it by crafting a new staff of law. A very powerful weapon that the old lords at Revelstone used to reinforce the power of nature. And he thinks he can do it. The Staff of Law was made, according to mythology, from the One Tree. A growth at the beginning of earth power, a pure earth power plant. And Covenant thinks that if he can find the One Tree, he can reforge a Staff of Law. So he goes on a quest. The first book in this trilogy is rough sledding, just like the first book in the first trilogy. But the second book is pure quest. This is pure high fantasy, where Donaldson gets to leave the land behind and give us entirely new creations. He brings some old creations with him. We have the Harukai, for instance, a tight-lipped martial people who were key characters in the first trilogy. We have a few of those. And we have giants. We only got to know one giant in the first trilogy, Saltheart Foamfollower. We met very briefly the last of the remnant of the giants who lived in the land as they were being slaughtered to a man. But now we meet a ship's crew of giants, and they are a society in and of themselves. They have never lived in the land. They don't know anything about the land's traditions other than their own folklore. They're an entirely new breath of fresh air. Just wonderful. I remember, before I started this second trilogy, the second time here, I remembered how much I liked their portrayal, especially the relationship between the leader of the quest, a woman called the First, and a hunchback giant named Pitchwife. The poignancy of the connection between those two gets greater as it goes along. And I'm loving it even more. What an adventure writer Donaldson is. What an adventure writer. And that's what we get in the chapters that we're reading today. We're reading the next 7 chapters in this book, and we get more adventures. Our cast and crew have already met the Elohim, an ethereal, shape-changing people who are sort of the personification of earth power, and who are every bit as dangerous and unaccountable as earth power can be in its raw form. But now we move on. We move on to a desert people, the Bratharain people, who have a very... they have a corrupt society, but they're, like most corrupt societies, it's corrupt at the top. There are lots of innocent people in their society. And they have a very dangerous, precisely timed relationship with creatures called sand gorgons. who are constantly tormented by a phenomenon called the gyre. Otherwise, they would tear apart the world of the Breatherain. They would tear apart the whole world. They're unbelievably strong and mindlessly dangerous. So that, as one character says in the chapters that we're reading today, only one of them, given enough time, could destroy their whole kingdom. And there are many of them. The only reason they don't do that is because they have their own preoccupations with this thing called the gyre. But it is possible to summon one by speaking its name. This is suicide, and everyone knows it. It's the ultimate form of punishment in the Breatherain society, is for you to be put in an arena and made to speak the name of a sand gorgon. Then it comes and it kills you mindlessly. The mindless part is a little bit of a continuity question for me. Some of you will remember in the first trilogy, there is a weird inhuman character named Amok, who occasionally appears and becomes pivotal in the Ill-Earth War. And when Amok talks about his adventures in the land, he talks about riding the sand gorgons. And they don't seem, they're humanoid and they're man-sized. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing that you would ride. Even if you're, an eternal man boy with floppy curly hair like Amok. It seems like Donaldson didn't quite know what sand gorgons were. He had the term, and he had a vague idea when he wrote the Ill-Earth War, and changed it as he went along here. But one way or another, that is the gist of the chapters that we're reading today. I want to keep these read-alongs fairly short because my library tour went long as usual. but the main question that I have, the adventures that we have here involving more poisoning, more trouble, more questions about about the unhealthy relationship between Thomas Covenant and his white gold wedding ring, the source of this incredible wild magic that is more powerful than anything in the land, but that Covenant has a weirdly ambiguous relationship with. We get a lot more of that, a lot more of Lyndon Avery. She is fleshed out a lot more in these chapters, but we also lose some characters to sand gorgons. And the plot just hurtles ahead. We get to know the giants of the Search a lot better as these go on. And basically, that is my question for those of you that are following along here. Are you enjoying this as much as I am? I'm having a ball. I'm so glad that I got this hardcover, because I am definitely going to want to keep this. This is first-rate adventure fantasy. It's can be a little wordy. That is Donaldson's besetting sin as a writer. He can be a little wordy. He's a little bit too in love with his vocabulary, but it's very restrained, at least in the chapters that we're reading today. And I wanted to wrap this up. I am just enjoying the hell out of this, absolutely. And we stopped for today with the chapter "Don't Touch Me," and now we're going to move on to chapter 21, which is called "Mother's Child." And in those next 7 chapters, if I remember correctly, we're going to learn a lot more about Lyndon Avery. And she's going to achieve a great deal more three-dimensionality. And we'll also learn a lot more about the Harukai. So I'll be right here for it. I want to wrap this up fairly early because I don't want to be uploading videos until 1 in the morning. I have a very slow upload speed here. And basically, that's where we are now. So those of you who are following along, I would love to know what you're thinking of this. But in the meantime, I'm going to call a halt, and I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.